Hey friends, welcome back to the Guitar Max channel, and today we are going to look at an amplifier for when you just need that real quality tube tone, but you don't want to sacrifice features and go with an actual old clunky vintage amp. So this here is the Blues 20 Overdrive Special Tube Combo Amp from Bootlegger Guitar. This is a real old school analog hand-wired tube combo amp, but it combines a set of features that bring it into modern amp usability territory. It's basically an old school amp, but with all the bells and whistles. Now, I've checked out stuff from Bootlegger Guitars before, but actual guitars, and also one tube overdrive pedal. But this is the first amp from them that I've been able to play through. And now I've borrowed this amplifier for the demo, and it's a beautiful amplifier, and so I'm really trying hard to not scratch it. Okay, so let's go over the basic specs first, and then we'll get into all of these different features and the different tones that you can get out of it. And what I've done here is I took this amplifier over to a rehearsal studio where I could really crank it up, and then I shot my demo footage over there. But we'll get to that in a minute. Essentially, this is a 20-watt tube combo. It's got a single 12-inch Celestion Vintage 30 speaker. It's got a pair of EL84 power tubes from Electro Harmonics, and then it's got Ruby Tubes 12AX7 preamp tubes. And I kind of like to think of this amplifier as a two-channel amplifier because you've got one basic clean channel, and then you have an overdrive circuit which you can engage, and you can flip back and forth between those two modes to sort of achieve, you know, like a clean and then a higher gain second channel. Now, look at all of these controls here. I'll give you some close-ups, but take a look at this. The controls are kind of split into three different sections. You've got the preamp section, you've got a second overdrive section, and then you have the power amp section. And if you look up here, we've got three mini switches, which in addition to all of the EQ controls, this gives us a lot of different options with these mini switches here. The first one here is bright, so it's basically like a bright off and on switch. Next to that, we've got a mid boost off and on, and then we've got another, a third switch here, which goes between rock and jazz. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, or you know, you'll hear it in action when we get into the demo. But the rock setting adds a lot of lower end power to the amplifier. And all three of these switches make a really big difference in the tone. So this is definitely an amplifier that you can really get a wide variety of tones out of. Now, the overdrive section has drive and level controls. And like I mentioned earlier, this section you can switch off and on through a foot switch or through an extra switch on the back panel, which I'll show you in a second. And then down here, we've got the power amp section, which is your presence control, and then the master volume. And then on the back panel, we have even more controls. So we've got these two switches here, which can be controlled manually with the switches or through a foot switch, and the foot switch is included with the amplifier. But one is to toggle the overdrive section off and on, and the other one has an additional preamp boost. So this will boost the initial input to the preamp even higher. So it's kind of like the equivalent of taking an overdrive pedal with the distortion or the gain all the way down, but the level very high, right? So it doesn't really add like distortion to the signal, but it just makes the input level a lot higher. Anyway, let me show you some of this stuff in action. So let's go ahead and get into the demo, and I'll kind of walk you through a bunch of the different sounds that we can get out of this amplifier. Now, for the demo, I'm using a pretty basic Strat with a humbucker in the bridge and a single coil in the neck pickup, so keep that in mind. As now, let's take a look and listen to this demo footage that I shot at the rehearsal studio, because just as a reminder, this is only a 20-watt amplifier, but it's 22 watts. This amp gets really loud, and I was able to really crank it up in the studio. So let's take a listen to how it sounds. So like I mentioned earlier, the rock jazz switch, the third one right here, when you engage that to the rock setting, it adds a lot of bottom end to the tone. And the jazz setting is a lot more mid-rangey and a little more higher end to give it that kind of chimey sound. Okay, so now let's check out the overdrive section, and for me this is where the amp really comes alive. So take a listen to this. So one of the things that I think is really cool about this amplifier is that considering how clean the tone starts out, you can get a lot of gain out of this amplifier. When you engage that preamp boost and you have the overdrive section turned on and cranked up, I mean, this really turns into a distortion type amplifier. Now that being said, I did want to test the amp out with a separate overdrive pedal. So we can listen to that and you can compare how the pedal sounds to the amplifier's overdrive section. Alright, so the thing with the overdrive there, that was my Boss SD1 pedal, which I love. But you really don't need the overdrive pedal because, yeah, it had a slightly different character. I think using the pedal gave it a slightly tighter sound, but the overall tone, especially on the lead parts there, it really wasn't that different. So, I mean, unless you had a very particular overdrive pedal that you just always love to use, I really don't think you need it with this amplifier because it has that preamp boost and the overdrive section built in. Okay, so one of the things that I want to stress that was really reinforced when I was listening to the amplifier in the rehearsal room is how loud this amplifier is. A lot of people argue about 20 watts and like tube watts versus solid state and that kind of stuff. And people are like, oh, tube amps are always louder with the same wattage. And people are like, well, you know, other people are like, oh, that's not technically possible, this kind of stuff. Regardless of all that stuff, in person, this is an extremely loud amplifier. And it's more than loud enough to play a gig like with a loud drummer, or if you're doing an outdoor gig where you really have to be loud because the sound dissipates so quickly. This amp would work great for that. Now there's two other really key features that you have to know about. One is that the amplifier has an effects loop. So even though you've got the built-in overdrive and that kind of stuff, there's no reverb or delay effects or anything like that built in, but because you have the effects loop, you can add basically any effects you want to the amplifier. And the other thing is that the amp has an external speaker jack. So of course you can use it as a combo amp with the internal speaker, or you can use it as a head and hook up external speaker cabs. And you even have a control on the back of the amplifier to select the impedance you want, 4, 8, or 16. So overall, I mean, this would be a great sort of one-stop shop gigging amp, especially if you're doing like blues rock or something like that, where you have to be able to go very easily between a really nice clean tone and a really nice, you know, like dirty bluesy tone. This amp would be perfect for that. And with the sort of switchable overdrive, and you know, some people will argue is like, well, is it really a 2-channel amp because it just has the one EQ section? It kind of depends on how you want to look at it. But with the foot switch that it comes with, where you can switch that overdrive off and on, and then the effects loop, I mean, the amp will really get all of the sounds that you need. All right, guys, so now the million-dollar question that everyone is wondering. You're all asking, hey, Danzig, how much does this amplifier cost, right? Because it's a tube amplifier, hand-wired, all analog. Well, the amplifier costs $14.99, so about $1,500. So no, it's not a crate practice amp or a PV Bandit or anything like that. But I think if you are looking for a sort of do-it-all Swiss Army knife type of tube combo amp with just really good quality and really nice sounds, I think this is definitely one to consider.